From the outside, I never thought my marriage would get to this stage after 8 years of marriage, excellent professions, and a lovely home. Jason and Andy appeared to be the ideal pair. However, as perfection can sometimes be a fleeting illusion, our relationship began to unravel in private. It began with more time spent on phones than having talks, and fewer date evenings. Jason's once playful adoration had turned into compulsory kisses and nods. It was typical, I told myself. Love settles into something quieter. Passion wanes and life gets hectic. However, I secretly missed feeling alive, seen, and wanted. Then Ethan arrived. Jason's college bestmate was Ethan after a difficult divorce. He just returned to town and spent more time at our house than at his own. Charming, self-assured, and naturally magnetic, his presence appeared to cheer Jason up. So at first I didn't mind Ethan. Not only won Jason over, but he also won me over. They watched football, sipped beers, and laughed over old memories as if they were 20. Again, it wasn't immediately apparent. It was simply light-hearted mocking and casual conversation, the type that seem charmless until it's not. He would say lovely things about my food, make jokes about Jason getting married, and sometimes give me a long-lasting smile. It wasn't anything. I assured myself. My culinary joke about Jason getting married was hilarious, and I periodically smiled for a bit too long. It was nothing. I assured myself I cherished my spouse. Even a crumb feels like a feast when you're desperate for attention. But Ethan was only a buddy. I saw how naturally the talk flowed between Jason and Ethan. One evening after Jason asked him around for supper, as Ethan and I laughed and shared tales, Jason was preoccupied with browsing through his phone. Clean Thedible, and it felt good. I led Ethan into the kitchen. His voice lowered to a soft murmur as he stood nearby. Jason is unaware of his good fortune with a dish towel in hand. I froze. Don't say that. Why? Not it's accurate. He kept his eyes on me. With my heart racing, I took a step back. The air heavy with unsaid words. You ought to go, with a knowing smirk pulling at the corner of his lips. Ethan nodded. Yes, I should, but neither of us thought it would go that far after that night. The tension between Ethan and me didn't go away, on the contrary. It intensified like a smoldering flame waiting for the ideal opportunity to explode. I convinced myself that it was only harmless. Flirting, but deep inside I was aware that I was risking my life. Jason often invited Ethan to join in on game evenings, cookouts and informal get-togethers that lasted well into the night. Every look, unintentional touch, and shared giggles seemed like a step closer to a precipice. Even though you share a bed with someone every night, loneliness and still strike. Jason didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he didn't care, because he was preoccupied with work. His phone and the quiet distance that had formed between us before Ethan arrived. One evening, Jason fell asleep on the couch while I was loading the dishwasher. Ethan stayed in the kitchen. The silent tension between us was obscured by the TV's steady hum coming from the living room. You okay? He said, leaning against the counter with a drink in hand. I shrugged and looked away. Yes, I'm simply exhausted, weary of acting as though nothing was wrong. Ethan laughed in a dry, humorless tone. The soapy water caused my hands to freeze as I looked up. I realized for the first time that he wasn't merely flirting. Rather, he was waiting for me to confess something we both knew it couldn't. I muttered to myself, more than to him. Ethan moved in closer. Emma, you deserve better than this. But you don't have to. Feeling wanted is something you deserve. I wasn't prepared for how hard the words hit. Wanted. I hadn't felt that way in such a long time. Like I was more than simply a wife, a companion in duties and routines. I took a step back and shook my head. This is incorrect. Ethan remained still. So why does it feel so natural? I detested the ease with which he dissolved my walls, and the speed with which my determination gave way to want it was about everything and not just. Then there was no longer any romance, connection, or warmth in my marriage. Jason's gentle snores filled the room. As I lay in bed next to him that night, looking at the ceiling silently, My phone buzzed on the bedside table. Ethan Asterisk is also unable to sleep. I didn't disable his phone, but I also didn't respond. It was inevitable that one of us would breach the established boundary. It took place on a night that felt exactly like the innumerable other nights Ethan had spent at our house. I'd occupied myself in the kitchen, trying not to notice the sly glances that Ethan and I shared when Jason asked him over to watch a game, but pretending only lasts so long with the monotonous din of the TV filling the room. Jason slept out on the couch, half-finished. Ishadred in hand, Ethan got up, stretched, and looked at me from the other side of the kitchen island. The tension was overwhelming. Yet no words were spoken. Ethan said I should go, but his feet remained still. I took a deep breath. Indeed, you ought to. Neither of us thought so. I looked at Jason, who was sleeping and unaware of the tempest that was building all around him as I left. The kitchen, my heart was thumping in my chest without hesitation. Ethan followed. The door of the guest room briefly clicked shut behind us. The burden of months of repressed longing fell upon us. As we stood there, I was aware that it was incorrect. I didn't feel like a wife. As I stood there with Ethan's breath warm on my skin even, though I knew I was betraying the person I had vowed to love and respect. Once more I felt like a woman wanted, desired, and alive. Ethan gave me a facial cue. I looked for hesitancy in my thoughts, and when he couldn't find any, he kissed me. It was not tender. It was time-sensitive and harsh, driven by the bitterness of neglect and the pain of desire. The final sliver of shame was ready to be washed away as it hit the floor. Reason buried beneath waves of emotion when a voice broke through the mist, "Don't stop." On my account, I went cold. Ethan tensed up with his arms crossed and his expression. In Scrabble, Jason stood in the doorway, causing me to feel ashamed and breathless. I trembled with fear and terror as they all struck me. Simultaneously, I pulled the cover around me and mumbled. Jason, I'm not sure why, but Jason appeared pleased rather than furious. Explain, he said with a sad laugh. Emma, I'm not blind. I've been anticipating the event for months. Ethan took a step back, looking pale. I didn't save it, dude. Jason interrupted him with a snap. I don't know. My wife, do you think, how did she quit trying with me the minute you arrived? And how does she light up when you enter a room? My throat constricted. This isn't real, Jason. Please. He grinned. Icily now. Go ahead and complete what you began. Don't let me stop you if this is what you desire. The sound of his footsteps drifted down the hall as he turned and left. Ethan got up, frozen eyes dart between the vacant doorway and me. Emma, what on earth just took place? I was unable to respond. Remorse curled from the intensity that had been so energizing only moments before. We had finally seen reality, and it was far more repulsive than I had anticipated when Jason left the home. Became strangely silent. The weight of what had just transpired was suffocating, and unavoidable. Half-dressed Ethan stood there. Frantically raking his fingers through his hair, he said, Vote Emma. The event wasn't intended to happen this way, and I regret it deeply. I couldn't, so I didn't respond. My heart pounded in my chest, drowning out every logical thought. What had I done? What have we done? It should leave. At last, Ethan murmured, grabbing a shirt off the ground. I couldn't meet his eyes, so I nodded. Numbly, he seemed to want to say anything more for a while, but then he simply groaned and slid out the door. Sitting on the bed's edge, I felt the stillness weigh me down like a thick blanket. I heard Jason moving around drawers, opening and closing, and the distinct sound of a bag zipper somewhere down the hall. I was filled with panic. He was packing a suitcase systematically in the bedroom when I staggered into the hallway. Jason, please don't do this, I gasped out. Let's have a conversation. Avoided looking at me. Talk as though you've been speaking with Ethan for months. I wasn't prepared for the depth of his statements. I grabbed for his arm, but he retreated and looked up at me. But there was only tiredness in his eyes. Not wrath, Emma. I'm not upset, I'm just finished, he whispered softly. No amount of yelling could ever match the finality of his voice, I said, tears streaming down my face. I didn't want this. We were both lonely, me included. Ethan was simply present. Jason put a palm to his face and moaned, "Yes, loneliness is not a justification for treachery. Without." Saying another word, he went past me and shut the luggage, the front door shut. Behind him, and my marriage ended. Abruptly, I spent weeks living in the wreckage of what I had destroyed despite Ethan's repeated texts. I chose to ignore. Him reality had tainted. Whatever bond we had had, it had never been about love, only about getting away from the emptiness that Jason and I had let develop. Jason eventually filed for divorce. There were just two persons signing documents admitting that they'd lost something, that neither had fought hard enough to keep looking back at, with no spectacular encounters or acrimonious disputes over property. It's much too easy to confuse attention for affection when someone else provides what you've been lacking. And I wish I'd recognized sooner that love doesn't simply die. It starves and fades when threatening moments, modest gestures, and shared laughter are replaced with quiet and indifference. The woman who believed love could overcome all obstacles and my spouse died. It turns out that the one thing it cannot withstand is treachery.